What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my refined review and builds guide for Pirate Veronica, Ilyana, Flayn, Melody, and Veld's Weapon Refine. So let us begin with the winner of this batch in Pirate Veronica. So she had Gate Anchor Axe, which did give her -1 special cooldown and guaranteed follow-up attack, and now she has got Canto Distant Traveled +1, and this can go up to max 4. So this is extremely good, and I think this is the first time that we have seen this on a Weapon Refine. So even if she's not running Emblem Seagard as a ring, she's still going to be having amazing Canto, which is just really great for player facing and also for retreating. And then she's able to get +10 defense and resistance in the combat, and she also inflicts -10 defense and resistance on the foe. So the resistance debuff is a bit weird because she doesn't really have the Hexblade effect, and unlike Brave Alphonse, her resistance isn't really all that high to avoid a lot of these Scal effects. But I guess if you run her with any kind of unit who can give her the Hexblade effect, the resistance debuff can come in handy. And then she has got special cooldown -X jump before her first attack. So this is the special jumping that we have seen on Momentum, and she has got a mini Momentum built in this Weapon Refine, and it is going to be working on the spaces moved by whoever initiated. So it is going to be functioning similar to a Clash skill, and the max special cooldown jump you can get is 3. So this allows you to easily trigger stuff like Bonfire and Ignis in her player phase, and this also helps her a ton against these Scal enemies because she is going to be having a lot of special jumps. So if you run something like Bonfire, it's going to be getting offset by the Scal effect and you're still able to trigger the special. And if that was not enough, she also gets amazing support, and she's able to inflict the closest foes and foes in 2 spaces of them for -7 attack and defense debuff, and also the feud status. So Veronica just embracing the Emblem bloodline here and inflicting the feud status on the enemies. And we already know how good feud status is with Emblem and Bride Emblem. But this is even better, I would argue, in many of these situations because this has got the global range and not the 3 rows and 3 columns like Emblem. So this allows you to inflict the feud status on multiple enemies regardless of your positioning, and you're also able to disable them from using any kind of supportive skills of their allies. And this is actually pretty huge because we have got a lot of Breath of Life 4, and usually you'll see 1 or 2 units having Breath of Life 4. And not every single unit is going to be having Breath of Life 4 because of the opportunity cost. So they're going to be making use of the Breath of Life 4 of their allies. And feud status is going to be disabling them from doing that. So it is actually incredible in the meta right now. And she can definitely have competitive viability because of this feud effect. But still keep in mind that she is a melee cavalier, and she is not as insane as some of the modern melee cavaliers like Emblem Seagard. But still, this is a solid effect. And then she also gets true damage based on 20% of her defense, which is going to be nice for player phase nuking with the special jumping that she has got. So more damage output is always good. And if you gave her no quarter, then it is useless now because she gets the full damage reduction piercing when her special triggers. So she has no need of running no quarter, and she can just run Bonfire, Ignis, and if you're feeling funny, then even Astra in some cases, but mostly Bonfire and Ignis because of their consistency and scaling off of her defense. So Pirate Veronica becomes one of the 4 units in the game to inflict the feud status on the enemy, 2 of them being Emblem and then 1 of them being Duo Shamir with her Duo Button. But Pirate Veronica is more flexible, and she definitely has usage in Ether Raid's offense and also in Summoner Duels. And if you're a big Veronica fan, then you've won hard because this is a really solid and unique Weapon Refine. And you don't really have to give her a lot of the expensive skills because she already has the good Canto and the special jumping. So she can make use of even the low investment skills, and you're going to be using her quite a lot in Resonant Battles because of her being a harmonic unit. So even though she gets the good Canto out of her weapon, I still think that Emblem Seagard is worth running because you get the +1 movement and you become a 4 movement cavalier. So it does work well with her special jumping and the spaces you need to move, and it also gives you a bit more damage output on your special triggers. So it's a pretty nice Emblem ring for her, and you can keep her base kit and simply run attack defense clash, and you should be working fine for Resonant Battles and also for Arena Assault. But if you're going to be giving her more skills, then you could definitely try and run attack defense clash for on her. So this is going to be giving her the debuff neutralization to her attack and defense, which does help you offensively. And you can also run Panic Smoke 4 and she already gets the debuffs with her weapon, so being able to panic the enemy is also helpful. And lull attack defense is still going to be a pretty nice skill for her because a lot of the options are going to be overlapping a bit with her weapon. So if you don't want to give her that, then this default skill could work out fine. And Bonfire is a 2 cooldown special with her weapon, and she can get 3 special jump. So even if you face any kind of scowl enemy, you're going to be offsetting that and still triggering your Bonfire. So it is going to be the special that you can run. But if you don't really care about, scowl effects, then I guess you could try and run Ignis as well for better damage output, or if you're going to be giving her any kind of special jumping support from some other unit. And you can also fodder Brave Alphonse to her for reopening, as it's one of the better skills that you could try and run on her. And you also get the true damage out of it. Now it's not to the max level because she does have the guaranteed follow-up attack, but still it can help you in the mix phase. And Attack Defense Excel is also a pretty nice skill for her, giving her the flat damage reduction and the extra bulk. So it can make her quite bulky and make sure that she's able to survive hits. And because she has got amazing Canto in her weapon refine, she can always set up the Pathfinder with Defense Rush Smoke 3, so that's also an option that you could try and run on her. And because you're going to be foddering Brave Alphonse to her, then you could also try and get Fortifications and Breath of Life 4. Now this is not a full player phase build, but this can work out if you are going to be trying to make use of her in the mix phase. So she could just initiate, nuke something with Bonfire, retreat with her Canto, and then set up the Stone Train to hopefully tank. She doesn't really have any kind of flat damage reduction in her weapon, so she's not going to be as bulky, but still it's an option. And Breath of Life 4 can also work out to get the healing, and it is going to be scaling off of her defense. And you could also run her into Raid's offense for the Gale Force strategies for even hit and run. So you could just go in, retreat, and then shadow shift some kind of unit in and go from there. Now she is going to be getting the healing out of shadow shift, which can be a bit annoying, and she's going to be having enough HP to not get bothered by the max level Hex Trap. But it is not going to be the easiest to fall into the Wings of Mercy range, even with Double Fury build, unless you have got Wings of Mercy 4. So Assassin's Strike is also an option for her slot B so that you can get even more true damage. And keep in mind that she's going to be disabling the Breath of Life usage with her feud status, so even Breath of Life's pre-combat healing isn't really going to be that big of a deal for Assassin's Strike's pre-combat damage. But in the Aster season, there is going to be Freyr, who's going to be run with Hathrin, and Freyr is going to be cleansing any kind of feud status of Veronica, so the cleansing is something you'll need to watch out for. And there's also Attune Micaiah, who's a really meta unit. So I feel like at higher investment, Shadow Shift is easily the best Lottie skill that you could try and run, and it goes really well with the amazing Canto that she has got. And if you're trying to immediately trigger Gale Force with the special jumping of her weapon, then Emblem Marth could be run so that you could have a 3 cooldown Gale Force. And if you don't want to run Emblem Marth, then you could just give her any kind of pulse support from Garrick or Asker, and it should be working fine. For the absolute max investment, I would definitely recommend having Momentum for her. So it is going to be having a bit of overlap with her weapon with the special jumping and the guaranteed follow-up attack, but sometimes people get really caught up in the overlapping of the skills instead of focusing on the best effects that you can get out of it. And the best thing out of Momentum 4 is the 20 true damage that you're able to get. You're not going to be able to get as much true damage with Assassin's Strike or with Reopening, so it is really helpful in nuking with her weapon. And of course, you're going to be having insane amounts of special jumping up to 5. So that is going to be a bit of an overkill. And I guess you could run Ether, but damage-wise, Ignis is just better. So I guess if you face something like a doubled Scowl effect, you're still going to be having enough special jumps to easily trigger Ignis. Or if you're not able to travel the full distance with her weapon and Momentum 4, you're still going to be having enough special jumps. So it is definitely the best Stolpy skill that you could run on her to get the max player phase nuking. And then Attack Defense Excel is really hard to beat for its flat damage reduction, and Shadow Shift is insane utility wise, which you should be running at this kind of investment. Flayn's Weapon Refine is something a lot of people were looking forward to, because when Flayn came out, she was a really meta influential support unit because of her damage reduction drive, and at that time we also got the save skill, so she was just amazing. But then we got a lot of damage reduction piercing and she was not able to keep up. And unfortunately, she doesn't really get the best of the weapon refines. She's going to be paying the healer tax, unfortunately. So her weapon Caduceus Staff did have Wrathful Staff built in, so you want to use her with dazzling skills like Dazzle Fortress, which I wouldn't really recommend, or Dazzling Shift or Dazzling Discord. And then she has the Joint Drive effects. So previously she only gave out 30% damage reduction, but now she can also get that for herself, and she also gives out +4 resistance and attack to the allies and also the guard effect. So her range doesn't really get increased to 3 spaces, it is still 2 spaces, and 30% damage reduction and guard isn't really all that insane nowadays because we have got so much damage reduction piercing and null guard and tempo effects and special jumping that guard is not really going to be mattering all that much for the tanks. So unfortunately she doesn't really get a substantial upgrade to like the flat damage reduction like Setet, which she's maybe able to give out. And now with the weapon refine, she's able to get +10 to all of her stats in the combat, and she has got Omni Guidance 4 built into this weapon, similar to Attuned Micaiah and Legendary Alencia. So I really like this effect because this allows you to even warp with cavalry and armor units, and this is going to be at least making her function a bit better as a support unit. But then again, we've got a lot of flyers who can easily run Soaring Guidance or Soaring Echo, and warping isn't really all that tough. And now we have also got Attuned Micaiah, who not only gives you Omni Guidance, but also heals you, cleanses you, debuffs the enemy, just does so many things compared to Flayn. So the roll compression is pretty insane, and Flayn is also able to give out some of the visible support. So to herself and the allies in 2 spaces, she's going to be giving out +6 attack and resistance buff and the special charges status. So special charges status can be helpful on many of the allies, and at least she's going to be giving a bit more support than what she already gave out. And she also gets the guaranteed follow-up attack because she is a slow healer, so she was missing that. And overall her weapon refine unfortunately kind of misses the mark, and the expectations were really high because of Setet getting an insane weapon refine for being a demote unit. And Flayn, despite being a premium 5-star healer, doesn't really get any kind of insane effects which she really needed to stand out. With the onset of power creep nowadays, we have got so many units who can fulfill the supportive role, and again, if you want to have a pure supportive unit, then it's really hard to beat Setet when it comes to getting the flat damage reduction for tanking, and he's just amazing even for the cutthroat competitive game modes. So unfortunately Flayn is really not going to be able to stand out that much. The best thing about her weapon refine is definitely the Omni Guidance 4 and the special charges status that she's able to give out. So maybe if we get better slotty skills like Ground Orders 4 and better attuned skills, then she might be able to support even better, but that's completely in the future, and right now it's not looking the best for her, seeing the competition and seeing the kinds of insane nuking units that we have got in the game. So her support is not going to be that substantial for many of the tanks, and she has got more of the utility with the Omni Guidance 4. Still, if you want to use her for like super budget for arena assault and limited battles, then you could just give her double disengard. This is the skills that she used to use back when she came out and she was really dominant. So you could try and run that and just give her attack resistance catch 4. An Emblem Secret could be run so that she can get some kind of Canto and have better mobility. So if you are not using someone with Emblem Secret, then she can definitely take it. And if you want to make her better, then you definitely want to fodder off Ascended Alencia and Attuned Micaiah. So Fortress Echo is definitely going to be her best attuned skill, giving her that Canto 1 at the bare minimum, and Dazzling Shift does allow her to get the warping, so she does become like a healer, Legendary Alencia in a way, and you're also able to get Lights Restraint and Fire Flood boost 3 at the same time. And if you fed your Attuned Micaiah Breath of Life 4, then you can also get that. There are a lot of skills that you could run in her slotsy, like Odd Even Recovery, the Crack skills. There's just a lot of options, but in my opinion, Breath of Life 4 is just one of the better options just for its insane utility. So Flayn can try and run that because she doesn't really need to run Soaring Guidance. So that way she can just provide more support as a healer. And you can also run a Ploy skill in her slotsy, as it is also one of the better options. So you could just go all in and stack up the visible resistance with Crystalline Water and Stillwater Sacred Seal and ploy the heck out of the enemy. And you can also run Dazzling Discord, so that allows you to also debuff the enemy for the Discord status, so you can provide more support to your allies. And Magic Shield Plus is going to be the best assist for any kind of healer. It does have a bit of an overlap with her visible buffs, but again, it doesn't really matter because she's going to be able to give out the debuff neutralization status and also get the extra action for herself. So this is a max investment build to get the full use out of her visible resistance, and you could also run Stronghold on her, especially at max investment. So she doesn't really have that high of a defense, but with Breath of Life 4 she can get some healing for herself, but mainly she's going to be running that for the support. So this is also an alternate option that you could run if you don't want to run Crystalline Water at max investment. And Dazzling Discord is going to be her best slot B skill for stacking up the support, so definitely try and run that if you can. I use Ilyana quite a lot, and I'm happy to say that she got a pretty nice weapon refine for a demote unit. So she's got Craver's Tome now, which is going to be giving her plus 10 to all of her stats. So they've bumped up the extra stats in these weapon refines to plus 10 it seems, and she also gets the guaranteed follow-up attack because she was slow. And now she's able to get the flat damage reduction depending on the resistance difference between herself and the foe. And this is going to be an in-combat resistance check, so she's able to get max 20 flat damage reduction out of it, which is quite a lot. Now this is going to be varying depending on the foes that you face, but getting 20 flat damage reduction is really good, because even if it's scaled off of her resistance like we usually see, it's pretty hard to get like 20 flat damage reduction out of it. But she will need to be within 2 spaces of an ally for this to activate, so that is another condition, but the reward out of this is pretty heavy. And then she's got 7 HP healing after the combat, which does help her with the self-sustain. And then for her weapon refine, she gets the resistance null penalty, so none of the resistance debuff are gonna be slowing her down for the resistance check that she needs to meet for the flat damage reduction, and she also ignores any kind of visible buff of the enemy to their resistance. So this also helps her nuke better, and she has got true damage based on 20% of her resistance, which again helps her nuke better, and she also gets special cooldown +1 per attack. So if you're not going to be running some of the more expensive skills on her, this can definitely help you on a budget. And overall this is a pretty nice weapon refine because you could stack up the flat damage reduction with Lagu's Friend and get like 35 plus flat damage reduction, which is amazing for a demote unit. Now you need to keep in mind that Ilyana's Hall of Form is still in the revival pool, so if it wins that, then maybe you're able to get some expensive skills, so be mindful of that before investing some really expensive skills on her. Ilyana does have a resistance super boon, so make sure to use that, and she also has Resplendent Version, so if you have FE Pass, then you can get more extra stats, and any kind of extra stats on these older units is gonna be worth it. And she gets a pretty workable weapon refine, so if you don't have some of the insanely expensive skills, this is at least something you could try and give her. So attack resistance finish 4 is gonna be giving her even more healing and more true damage, and you can make use of her high resistance with Iceberg or even Glacies if you run her with Time Pulse Echo. But if you're going to be giving her Time Pulse Echo, then you might as well give her Lagu's Friend 4, so that's why I'm not showing that with this build. So with Emblem Marth, you can have a 2 cooldown Iceberg that you could loop with Special Spiral 4, get the full damage reduction piercing, and also the true damage stacking with her weapon and the finish skill. And for her slot C, a ploy skill is the absolute best, so not only it helps her with the resistance check that she's got in her weapon, but it also helps you provide support and productively use her high visible resistance. So you should definitely try and run that, and Still Water can be the sacred seal of choice because of having the ploy skill. And ultimately the best build for her is going to be using Lagu's Friend 4 and Flare. Now Flare is a 3 cooldown special, and because Ilyana doesn't have a minus in special cooldown weapon, it can actually function with Lagu's Friend, which is not often for many of the mages, so she's able to make use of this. And again, like I said, attack resistance ploy is basically the best slot C skill for her, and Lagu's Friend 4 is the best slot B skill that you could run on her because not only you stack up the flat damage reduction with her weapon and also the true damage with her weapon, but you also get the full damage reduction piercing, which is just amazing. And you also get the special jumps, so with Time Pulse Echo you can easily make use of Emblem Ike and run that with her. And attack resistance finish is something that you could run as I showed before, but Fire Flood Boost 3 is also an option. Guard is not really all that useful, but the extra HP from Fire Flood Boost at this kind of max investment with the Squad Ace Sacred Seal and the Summoner support actually makes her have really high HP, so she could try and get bulky with it and easily tank many of the units at range because of the flat damage reduction stacking that she's able to do with this kind of build. And even though her defense isn't really all that high, she's not going to be instantly getting vaporized to any kind of physical attack, so that is also good to have. You can also try and max out her resistance if you don't really want to run Fire Flood Boost 3, so Crystalline Water could be run. It does reduce her physical bulk, but if you're mainly going to be tanking mages, then this is also an option that you could try and do if you really want to stack up her visible resistance to get the most ploy usage out of her. Melody got done a bit dirty when she came out in FEH. She didn't even have a preferred weapon, and she is an amazing unit in Binding Blade, but this weapon thankfully fixes that. So she's got Crimson Lance, which does give her plus 10 to all of her stats in the combat, and then she also gets flat damage reduction on foes' first attacks, including the brave hits, depending on 20% of her defense. So flat damage reduction is always good on a high defense unit like her, who's mainly going to be melee tanking. Then she has got the follow-up denial built into this weapon, which is not the biggest deal, and then she has got the Rift effect, similar to Wyvern Rift, and you can even say that this is the half frozen effect. So it makes it harder for the foe to W because it is going to be checking her defense against foe's defense, and it increases the speed necessary for the foe to make a follow-up attack, depending on the difference between the defense times 2. And unlike Attuned Chimera, she doesn't have any kind of cap on this. So this could be run with Wyvern Rift, and it can be really hard for even some of the faster units to double Melody. So this is an interesting thing that she has got in her weapon refine, and keep in mind that this is not the full frozen effect because it doesn't really help her make the double easily. So it is, again, like I said, half frozen, and then she gets 7 HP healing after the combat. And just like Gaul, she's got attack speed, defense, God Crux built in her weapon. So it's a pretty nice bonus to have on her weapon. And she also gets true damage based on 20% of her defense. And then finally, she has got the guaranteed follow-up attack, which she needed, but again, it is going to be overlapping a bit with Wyvern Rift. So Melody gets a really fun weapon refine, and you could easily stack this up with Wyvern Rift and the frozen status from Summer Reed and make her a stupidly hard unit to double, and that is a unique thing that she has got going for her. She doesn't really give out as much support as many of the other flyers like Setet, for example, who's the best at it, but still the guard effect in the Crux range can be helpful, and you could run her with some of the fodder from the Divine Code. So no quarter is something she's going to be needing because she doesn't really get any kind of damage reduction piercing out of her weapon refine, which is one of the major things that she's missing. And Emblem Secret is going to be helping you get that +1 movement and also the Canto, so you don't really have to worry about running any kind of Canto skill. And Attack Defense Clash does give you the attack and defense debuff neutralization and does work with Emblem Secret really well. Guard Bearing can go well with the flat damage reduction that she has got in her weapon. It's not the best option, but still a decent option that you could get out of Divine Codes. And you also get Attack Defense Oath 4 at the same time from Nabata Juno, so that's also a decent skill for Slotsy. But if you're trying to completely max out on her with some expensive skills, then this is going to be the build, and this is definitely the optimal build for her because you stack up the flat damage reduction with Wyvern Rift, and you also stack up the Rift effect in her weapon. Now there's a bit of an overlap with the follow-up negation and the guaranteed follow-up attack, but I don't really think it's that big of a deal for the advantages it gives you, and her defense is pretty high, so she can easily run Breath of Life 4 and scale it off of that, and also provide the support to her allies. And Soaring Echo is also going to be the best attuned skill that you could run on her to give more support to her allies, and you can stack a fair amount of flat damage reduction with her weapon and also attack defense XL and the double Rift effect. Veld is the final unit out of this weapon refinery batch, and he had Petrify as a pretty interesting gimmick option. Unfortunately, he doesn't really get too much out of this weapon refine, but still his damage output does become a lot better. So now with the weapon refine, he has got the guaranteed follow-up attack, which is expected on these slower units, and from turns 1 to 5, he's going to be inflicting the following effect on the foe with the lowest stats in order of HP to resistance. So turn 1, he's going to be just targeting the lowest HP foes, and then on turn 5, he's going to be inflicting the status effect on the lowest resistance foes. So unfortunately, it doesn't really get an extension, and it is still limited from turns 1 to 5, and he's able to inflict the gravity effect on them, which he also did before. But keep in mind, he doesn't splash the gravity effect. onto other foes in 2 spaces of that target foe, or even 1 space of that target foe, it is only going to be affecting that target foe. And gravity is not as insane as before because we've got a lot of warping and a lot of cleansing, but still it would have been cool if he was able to splash it to allies in 1 space of the target foe at least, but unfortunately he doesn't get that. He's also able to get -7 attack and speed debuff on the foe, and he's able to splash this in foes in 2 spaces of that target foe, and now he also gets the sabotage status on those foes. So it's definitely a bit better, but again, he needed a lot more in my opinion to stand out, and this definitely makes him as a decent side grade option to Validar, but I still prefer Validar a lot more than Veld. So with the Weapon Refine, he's able to get +10 to all of these stats in the combat, and he also gets dull attack resistance, so he ignores any kind of visible buffs of the enemies to those stats, and he has got true damage, which is kind of like dominance in a way, so it is going to be taking the highest total penalties on target and foes in 2 spaces of the target. So it does allow his damage output to be a lot better because if he debuffs all of these stats of the enemies with a tier 4 ploy skill like defense res ploy, then he's able to get 26 true damage just out of the debuffs, and the exposure status gives you 10 true damage on top of it. So his damage output can definitely be pretty nutty now with the Weapon Refine, and then he has got the 30% damage reduction piercing, which doesn't really mean much because it's completely pierceable, and he's not going to be tanking a lot of the range enemies unlike Ilyana. So he's mainly going to be focusing on debuffing the enemies, making use of the ploy skill, and then get a lot of true damage out of his dominance-ish effect. And if you're going to be building him up, then I guess you could try and run this kind of build. Defense res ploy is easily his best Lotsie skill because it capitalizes off of the debuffs that he already gets, and he's able to completely debuff enemies, which is really good for the dominance effect. And then you could get the full damage reduction piercing with Special Spiral 4 and function in the player phase. Crystalline Water is going to be there with the ploy skill to make it easier to ploy the enemies. And with Emblem Marth, you could have a 2 cooldown Iceberg, which you're able to loop. But if you have the expensive skills, then Lagoose Friend is definitely an option that you could try and run with Flare, but don't really expect him to tank that much because unlike Ilyana, he doesn't really have the flat damage reduction, and he's going to be completely depending on Lagoose Friend for any kind of bulk, but still an option at this kind of max investment. I want to thank all of my 2 members for their constant support, and you can click the link on the screen right now to check out my breakdown of the new Halloween banner. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as Veld's weapon after turn 5. So with that, so let's see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.